The reviews are in, and we're going to tell you what they are because we have very little else to tell you this week. It's that post-holiday time of the year when no one really feels like doing much of anything, and that goes true for most of the studios because we've got a whopping two stories. I'm holding up a 2, like you can see me. This isn't video. 2 stories this week. Anyway, he's Todd Vandenberg. I'm Rob Steele. Here's your 2 news stories to go with the 2 hosts.
Woo!
Disney, which as we all know, bought 20th Century Fox and its sub-studio Fox Searchlight Studios. This week they decided Fox needs to go, so it's now just 20th Century Studios and Searchlight Studios, and that's it. That's the end of story number 1. There's not much else to go with it. Or is there something?
Well, I'm surprised I'm not seeing any backlash, and maybe there has been, and I just haven't seen it. But from, Fox News fans who are angered at Disney for removing the stench and the taint, and I mean that in every way you can take it, of Fox from their studio names, because, it's pretty clear why Disney didn't want that. They easily could have kept 20th Century Fox and Fox Searchlight as names as separate divisions. And they clearly don't want to remove the legacy of those names because they kept 20th Century, which is kind of strange since we're in the 21st. And Searchlight, it's because they didn't want to be associated with Fox. So in our estimation, very good reasons.
Yeah. How hard is that?
Because it's a crap factory that affects real life. So, yeah, I don't think you would want to be associated with that. But again, it's nothing to do with the product of the studios because they kept those names. They want people to think of the legacy of 20th Century and Searchlight Films. But they just don't want the Fox included. So, kind of like they changed one of the vowel sounds in there and said, "Hey, Murdoch, to you."
Yeah. So the other news story involves something that's not going to actually happen until April 22nd of this year, but it does involve a 20th Century movie, by which I mean the studio and the year, because it has to do with a 1979 Ridley Scott film called Alien. Little film, might have heard of it. Dark Horse Comics seems to have gotten a hold of the original screenplay for Alien and is turning it into a graphic novel. Now, why this is an interesting thing, there were apparently a lot of changes made, including giving Ripley a sex change. I did not know Ripley was originally a dude.
That part I did know.
I might have known, but I've forgotten. I don't know. Anyway, I literally saw this about 5 minutes before we started recording. So I said, hey, we actually have a second news story. What a concept. I'll throw that in. Something I almost missed. Apparently, all 3 of the movies that we're reviewing this week are things that I had missed. Because yours, I hadn't even heard of, and the other 2 that I've got.
I do want to go back to the story about Alien and the script.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
and both of us, as do most of the people on the planet probably, really appreciate the talent of Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, yes.
But how blown away were they by the screen test of Weaver to think, you know what? And I'm not saying this is the sequence, but they changed the gender of the lead character for an
I would argue she wasn't the lead character until the end of the movie.
Right, until the end, she does turn out to be the protagonist because it's very much an ensemble piece, right? So, I'm sorry, spoiler alert for a 40-year-old movie. But that's her first movie, and a lot of people don't realize that. That's kind of crazy to get that kind of a performance from a rookie. So, yeah. Anyway, yes.
Well done, Sigourney.
No kidding. As she has continued throughout her career. Anyway, yes, I watched, and I was so thrilled to see that this was finally available for streaming. A little film, and it is kind of a little film called Parasite. I was hyped when this was announced because this is one of my favorite directors, and excuse me, Korean director Bong Joon-ho. Bong Joon-ho. Sorry. But
I have to admit that with the sound effects you had between the 2, I'm not entirely sure where the erroneous name ended and the actual one began.
Bong Joon-ho. So okay. This is a guy who directed Snowpiercer. Most people would know him for that. But also Okja, which was direct to Netflix here, which is a terrific movie about a weird, happy monster and the industry, which is the production of food. which weird concepts, but that's what it is. And The Host, which is a great creature feature, which is also a commentary on pollution and the government's role in whether or not they're taking care of their people. So everything has a social message with him. And Parasite is no different. Parasite is really about class warfare, but it's a very personal story because it's set in, there's a family and they're living in this sub-basement apartment, which apparently is very common in Korea. And of course, that itself is a commentary. They can see daylight, but that's not where they live. You know, they live down in the basement. They're down below street level, the normal level of society. And the two students and their parents, and they're college students. And they're just kind of scrambling to get by. I mean, they take side gigs to like fold pizza boxes, and they have to they have to haggle about it because one of them didn't fold the boxes correctly. So they're not going to pay them for a quarter of the production. Then they haggle to get 10%, and then the guy wangles to get a job out of it. Basically, this guy's friend has been tutoring a very wealthy young lady who was from a very wealthy family. He's taking off. He wants his friend to go ahead and tutor her because he's the only one he trusts. Not sure that I hit on this young teenage girl while he's gone. Cool. So he goes to tutor her in English. And he figures out a scheme where he's basically going to get his whole family jobs with this ultra wealthy family. Not letting them know that they're all family members, just with this subterfuge of, oh, I may know this person. So step by step, the family all gets ensconced. And they are all living off this very rich family as employees. Nothing nefarious about how they're getting money, just the fact that they got the jobs that way. And then another protagonist jumps in, and that's the parasite, as in like a social parasite, not like some literal monster, which could be in his movies.
I was kind of going, is it an alien with tentacles?
Yeah, it's not an alien with tentacles, although wouldn't be surprised. So then there's this third class struggle between the ultra wealthy, and I'm miming for Rob, so I have my hand up high, and then the people who are really lower middle class, and then another one that's not even in society anymore. So it's this battle between the two, fighting for the scraps that they're getting instead of battling the ones who have it all, which, again, a great reflection of class struggle anywhere around the world, because all the time, the 1%, and yes, I'm making this political because this is a very political film, how the 1% encourages the 99% to look down on the 10% and tell them, oh, it's those people who have next to nothing that are your problem because they want what's yours, instead of just owning up to the fact that, no, that's not the issue. So it's this class struggle between the barely haves and the have-nots. And finally, there's some changes towards the end with some really interesting changes. And it's not like political discourse. There's a lot of discussion, but there's a lot of action in this film. So it's something of a thrill. I'd say if it fits any general category, and his films rarely do, this would be a thriller. So it's just how events pan out and how the tensions play out between the wealthy family and the people who are their servants, who are expected to just do whatever the hell they are told to do because they're their servants. And it's that attitude that you see a lot of times, the entitlement of the people who have a lot, so they expect to get whatever the hell they want. It plays out in really interesting ways, and has a very... it's one of these movies that almost has two endings, because you think it's over and it's not quite. And that's when he delivers a real a kill shot, as the director himself put it, because he really wants to drive the message home, and he really drove the message home with his ending shot. So really, really good movie. I was very disappointed that it didn't play here. I'm in West Palm Beach. It didn't play here at all, which is crazy. But it's out now. Right now, you're going to have to pay for it if you want it, but it won't be long, I'm sure, before you can just rent it. And again, called Parasite. This is one of the rare films that not only is nominated for Best Foreign Film, it's nominated for Best Picture, period. And I love when they told the director, Bong Joon-ho, that he got this rare double nomination. He said, well, that's cool, but it's not really a big deal. He says, not like the Oscars are an international film festival. It's just a local thing. Which
I like this guy.
I love that, because he's right. It's not an internet. I mean, granted, the biggest film industry in the world. And I'm not talking about the sheer number of films because India puts out more films. But still, this is the biggest market by itself. But as far as the Academy Awards, yeah, this is an awards thing for films made in the United States, basically. And yeah, this won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, which is an international film festival and the biggest one, and it won Best Picture there. That's a lot more prestigious in the general film community than winning the Oscar for Best Picture. So, of course, that was his response. It's not like he doesn't care, but it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And that attitude is in all of his movies, by the way. This guy is an awesome director.
I have to admit that when you were describing this movie in pre-pro, hi, Ted, I misunderstood you, and it was the word foreign I misunderstood. I could have sworn you said porn. And I was like,
that would be really weird. That would be really weird.
Nominated for Best Porn and Best Film. I didn't know the Oscars did porn, but okay.
There's a pretty interesting scene in the film that it's not porn, but no.
Foreign film. Got it.
And by the way, he also is the writer of both the story and the screenplay, as he is for all of his films. This guy is like the bomb. Yeah, he is excellent. So, Parasite, highly recommended. I'm not sure if this is his best movie yet because, man, it's like everything the guy does is just terrific. But, yeah, it could very well be his best movie yet. And I would not be a bit surprised to see it win, to win Best Picture. When we get closer to the time, we'll talk about the Oscar picks and some of the unbelievably stupid omissions they have. But anyway, Parasite. Catch it. It's excellent.
Yeah, the two films I've got this week, and it just turned out this way, because I know last week I did two musical documentaries.
Right.
And this week I've got two musical documentaries. I'm pretty sure I cannot keep up this pace, because I'm going to run out of the ones I care about very quickly, in that I think I already have. And both of these are also foreign in that we live in the States. And
wow.
they came from the BBC originally.
So you're telling me you're not going to be reviewing two movies about Whitesnake? Okay.
Leonard Skinner too. No, I'm not. No, don't care in the slightest about those. I am going back to the 80s a bit, and it's kind of appropriate, I think, that Showtime is the one who's showing them in the States, because I haven't heard much about Showtime since the 80s. And these are two 80s bands that we're talking about. Well, actually, they're not necessarily 80s bands. They have a lot of similarities in that they're both pop bands. Mm-hmm. They both pretty much started in the late 70s, but didn't become really popular until they hit their peak in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And yet they're both still around.
I'm going to guess Duran Duran.
That would be one of them.
Yay. The first thing that popped in my head was Pet Shop Boys. I have no idea why.
They are actually still around as well.
I know they are, but anyway. So I will
shut
up.
The other one. And see, that's kind of weird that you mentioned that, because the Pet Shop Boys both got together with the drummer and lead singer of the other band and created a band called Electronic.
Freaky.
Just a thing. The other band I'm talking about is New Order, which are, I'll admit, they're not as popular as Duran Duran, because Duran Duran got huge back in the early 80s. But New Order also did a lot of songs that I think they did more songs that people would recognize, but not necessarily know who did. It's one of those, they do those songs where you go, I've heard that. I like that song. Who the hell is that? It's New Order. You get that a lot with New Order songs. Although they did some really, really funky videos in the late 80s that people would go, oh, that's where that came from. I've seen that picture before. But both of these documentaries, Duran Duran's There's Something You Should Know, which is kind of a play on one of their songs, and New Order's Decades, even though these bands are very similar, their documentaries are very different because the bands are very different. New Order started out originally as a band called Joy Division, and then their lead singer committed suicide. Very sad. And I think there's even a film about him, which I'm not going to do next week because I can't remember it right now. And it sounds depressing. And no offense to anyone in New Order. I just don't. I have no interest in watching something like that. At least not right now. Let's wait till Valentine's Day. When everyone's depressed anyway. So they reformed as New Order. And I was going somewhere with this, but I don't know what it was. Their songs are not as upbeat as Duran Duran's. But they're still There's still techno happy pop music. Well, not happy. Techno pop music that you can dance to. Whereas Duran Duran's is happy, not quite as techno, still dance to it music. And both of these documentaries kind of go that way. New Order, once they became New Order, became stable and didn't really change much over the years. Duran Duran broke up for a while. They got back together. They went off and did other projects and did other things and then came back, and then they all got drunk together and broke up and got back together. So guess what? Their documentary is a bit more interesting because more things happened with the band.
Makes sense.
It just kind of makes sense that way. They were, like we said, the more popular of the two bands with the charting and everything. And their plane has landed and there's billions of screaming girls charging the cars and the band. And they did talk briefly about how, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Not so much rock and roll, just lots of sex and... Okay. And you kind of go, yeah, I can see that. Whereas the New Order documentary, and I have to look back at this because they mentioned a few times how they were doing a thing for the Manchester International Festival. I watched this documentary and I still am not entirely sure what the Manchester International Festival is about or for. Apparently it involves a New Order concert with a new twist to it with a keyboard symphony in the background. It's kind of cool to watch, but and they talk about how they put it together and acquired all the keyboardists and built the set for this and everything and how it traveled around, because apparently the Manchester International Festival is not just in Manchester, it's in Milan and in Venice and whatever. I still don't know what it is. So there were a couple, in my mind anyway, there's a couple of snags with the New Order thing. Although, because they're talking about this festival along with the history of the band, which is not as turbulent as Duran Duran's, there's concert footage from this festival, which is kind of cool.
If you don't have concert footage I'm sorry, but if you don't have concert footage and you're doing a documentary on a band, don't do the documentary. That's just my opinion. Anyway. Yes. Well,
the Duran Duran one, conversely, did not have new concert footage. There was every so often, clips of here's something they did in a show, and here's clips of songs and whatever. But there was not anything new. The New Order stuff had something new in it. Maybe that's part of the name. But the Duran Duran stuff did have new interviews where they got most of the original band back together. One of them was missing. I'll admit, I'm not entirely sure which one it was. And they never really said where he was either. Okay, whatever. They put the four of them in a car, basically, and had them talk to each other for a while, which was actually kind of fun and interesting to watch because they would have stories and everything. So basically, we've just got these two musical documentaries. Both of them are on Showtime. Unless you're in the UK, then you can watch them both on apparently the BBC streaming service. The New Order one is also on Hulu at the moment. And I'm going to recommend both of them, even though I prefer the New Order one because more things happened to the band to make it a more interesting story. I mean, no offense to anyone who likes New Order. I like the band too. They just didn't have as much backstage stuff to talk about. It's just a thing. I like their music equally. I think I have everything that both bands have put out. So, two new musical documentaries to watch. There you go.
Which is lovely.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Here's something I'm going to compare it to. There's a show my wife and I tried to watch. Yes, this is kind of a bonus thing. We both like this comedian who's actually musical, named Tim Minchin. He's an Australian guy. If you get a chance to look up his stand-up stuff, he is hilarious. But he has a TV show called Upright, where apparently it's Tim playing someone else who has to transport an upright piano across Australia in a truck. And we tried watching this, and I'll admit, things happened in the show, but that's it. It was just nothing interesting, just stuff happens. He was in a car wreck, and even then we're kind of like, yeah, and? You spend a lot of time going, yeah, and, in this series, and the New Order documentary is kind of like that. Things happened. Here's something that's going to happen at the Manchester International Festival. Yeah, and? So, sorry, guys. Your documentary wasn't as good as Duran Duran's. It's a thing.
It happens.
Documentaries to watch, a movie to watch, and a TV show to, I love you, Tim, avoid.
So harsh.
I still love his stuff. I just didn't get into the show. I could not get into the show. There was nothing in the show to get into.
And it happens.
So rather than staying home and watching Tim Minchin's show, you know what you should do? You should get out and go see a movie.
Captain, we're losing power in the warp engines.
I think we should be leaving now.
I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife.
And on that unusually harmonious bombshell, it is time to end.
I am very disappointed!
Man, we have a weird job.
It's shameful, but, it's a living.
And like that, he's gone.
Hey, who turned out the lights?